morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Tong from the first affiliated hospital of Zhejiang University. My topic is about traumatic brain injuries. Traumatic brain injuries, TBI, occurs when external mechanical force traumatic injured the brain. TBI is a major cause of death and disability worldwide. Traumatic brain injuries, TBI, occurs when an external force traumatically injured the brain. TBI is a major cause of death and disability worldwide, especially in children and young adults. TBI is and it continues to an enormous public health problem despite major advances in medical progress. Most of these are classified as mild injuries, with about 20% classified as moderate to severe. In China, there are about 600,000 cases of head injury every year, and head injuries result about 100,000 trauma deaths, while in USA, every year there are 500,000 in USA, 500,000 to well over 1 million cases of head injury in USA, 500,000 to well over 1 million cases of head injury every year, and head injuries result in half of 150,000 trauma deaths. And it's estimated that 5.3 million people are living with brain injury related disability, and the cost exceeds $4 billion every year. And the cost is the financial cost is high, not only for the financial cost is high not only for the actual care, but also for the chronic long-term care. And because those injuries, the financial cost is high not only for the actual care, but also for the chronic long-term care. And because those injuries are frequently young, the mean age is in 30s. The common cause of TBI is falls, motor vehicle accidents, stricken by events, assaults, and other causes. TBI is the result of an external mechanical force applied to the cranium and the intracranial contents, which result in the temporary or permanently impairments, functional disability, and psychosocial maladjustment. TBI can manifest clinical from contusion. TBI can manifest clinical from contusion to coma and even to death. Injuries are divided into subcategories. First is primary injuries. Primary injuries occurs at the moment of impact. Primary injuries include bone fracture, concussion, contusion, hematoma, traumatic subarachnoid hemorrhage, and diffuse external injuries. Secondary injuries to the brain occurs as a result of decreased oxygen delivered to the brain, which in turn sets off secondary injury to the brain occurs as a result of decreased oxygen delivered to the brain, which in turn sets off a cascade of events that causes even more damage than the initial injury. For the primary injuries, a concussion is a temporary neurological neuronal dysfunction after non-penetrating head trauma. The CT scan is normal and deficits resolve over minutes to hours. Definition varies. some required the transient loss of consciousness. Others required alteration of mental states. Memory difficulty, especially amnesia of the event, is very common. The brain is also much more susceptible to injury from even minor head trauma in the first 1 to 2 weeks. From this schematic, we can see the intracranial hematoma. The epidural hematoma occurs between the dura and the inner side of the skull. It's usually the result of skull fracture, which results in shelling of mandibular artery. Subdural hematoma subdural hematoma occurs between the potential space between the arachnoid and the dura, and it's spread diffusely, and it's also subdural hematoma occurs between the potential space between the arachnoid and the dura, and the reason the cause is usually the sharing of the causing is usually the sharing of the bleeding vein. Subdural hematoma occurs between the potential subdural hematoma occurs between the potential space between the arachnoid and the dura. It's usually the result of sharing of the bleeding vein between the brain and the dural venous sinuses. And we also can see the intraparenchymal hemorrhage. And for the subarachnoid hemorrhage, consists of traumatic subarachnoid hemorrhage from trauma consists of bleeding into the spinal fluid spaces surrounding the blood vessel feeding the cerebral cortex. Because the blood from such a hemorrhage is spread diffusely, it does not cause mass. However, the diffuse layer of the blood may predispose this patient to cerebral vasospasm. Trauma is the most common cause of subarachnoid hemorrhage, and trauma is the most common cause of subarachnoid hemorrhage. Rupture of an aneurysm is the second most common cause of subarachnoid hemorrhage, and is usually distinguished from traumatic SAH by medical history and sometimes by distribution of blood on CT. And angiography, for example, CTA, MRI, or DRC, can diagnose this. Diffusal axonal injuries, DAI, is a rotational acceleration-deceleration injury to the white matter pathway of the brain, resulting in a functional and anatomic disruption of this pathway, and is cited as cause of loss of consciousness in patients without mass lesion. CT scan footprint of DAI consists of small pitical hemorrhages in the white matter. Most frequently see the corpus callosum and dorsal rostral brainstem. It should remember that many or even all of these types of lesions can occur concurrently. We can see the hemorrhage here. We can see the hemorrhage here. Secondary injuries include effects of hypotension, hypoxia, and herniation with elevated ICP due to mass effect. as a result of decreased oxygen delivery to the brain, which in turn sets off cascade of events. For example, mediator of inflammation, excitotoxicity, calcium influx, and natural potassium ATPase dysfunction, which leads to the neuronal cell dysfunction and death. Secondary insults can take many forms and can be summarized as follows. First is the secondary intracranial insult to the brain. Hemorrhage, ischemia, edema, raised ICP, vasospasm, infection, epilepsy, hydrocephalus. The secondary systemic insults to the brain include hypoxia, hypercapnia, hyperglycemia, hypotension, severe hypocapnia, fever, anemia, and hyponatremia. Secondary injuries are potentially preventable and treatable. The major focus in management of acute closed head injuries is prevention of secondary brain injuries, and the preservation of neurological functions are not damaged by the primary injuries. The injured neuron on the optimal milieu can resolve to functional cell, while on the suboptimal milieu, it may be result in death. Mechanism of the brain injuries. The physical mechanism of brain injuries are classified using the following categories. The physical mechanism of brain injuries are classified using the following categories. The first is impact loading. It means collision of the head with a solid object at a tangible speed. Impulsive loading means sudden motion without significant physical contact. While for the static or quasi-static loading means loading in which the effect of speed of occurrence may not be significant. Impact loading causes TBI through a combination of contact forces and inertial forces. Inertial force ensues when the head is set in motion with or without any contact force, leading to acceleration of the brain, while the contact force occurs when impact injury is delivered to the head at rest. Contact or inertial forces may strain the brain tissue beyond its structural tolerance, leading to injury. There are also three basic types of tissue deformation. We call compressive, tensile, or shear. From this picture, we can see the mechanism of brain injury, and we also can see the core injury and the contra-core injury. Core injuries is caused by direct transmission of impact energy through the skull into the underlying brain and occurs directly below the site of injury, and because of the creating of negative pressure when the skull is supported at the site of impact, return to its normal shape. Contra-core injuries is similar to the core contusion, but are located opposite. Contra-core injuries is similar to the contra-core injuries is similar to A conjugal injury is similar to cool contusion, but are located opposite the site of direct impact. Conjugal injuries are caused by rotation shear and other indirect forces that occur contralateral to the primary injuries. Rotational force causes the basal, frontal, and temporal cortices to impact or sweep across the rigid aspects of the skull. The sphenoid wing, the petrous ridge, commonly seen in the frontal and temporal lobe. This is the schematic for the mechanism of brain injury. And the amount of energy dissipated at the site of direct impact determine whether the ensuing contusion is of cool or conjugal type. Most of energy of the impact from a small hard object tends to dissipate at the impact site, leading to cool contusion. In contrast, impact from a larger object causes less injury at the impact site, leading to a conjugal injury. While head injuries could be classified in several different ways, the most practical categories are based on mechanism, severity, and morphology. By mechanism, the TBI can classify as closed or penetrating injuries. Closed head injuries is usually caused by high velocity, for example, auto accidents, or low velocity, for example, falls or assaults. For the penetrating brain injuries, gunshots or other stabs gunshots and other stabs injuries will result in the penetrating brain injury. We use Glasgow Coma scales to classify the severity of brain injuries. Glasgow Coma scales has gained wide use for the description of patients with head injuries, and also have been adopted for description of patients with altered levels of consciousness due to other causes. Head injuries patients with a GCS score of 13 to 15 have been classified as mild, while with a score of 9 to 12 has been classified as moderate, and 8 or less is classified as severe. 80% of head injuries are mild, and 10% as moderate, and 10% as severe. By morphology, we also can classify it as skull fracture or intracranial lesion. By morphology, we can classify as skull fracture or intracranial lesion. For the skull fracture, we can classify as vault or basilar injury. Vault include linear or stellate, or depressed or undepressed fracture. Basilar, with or without CS leak, with or without the sense nerve injury. While for the intracranial lesion, it may be focal or diffuse. For the focal, it includes epidural, subdural, or intracellular, or it includes epidural, subdural, or intracerebral lesion. While for the diffuse lesion, it can be classified as mild concussion, classic concussion, or diffusal axonal injury. For the pre-hospital and emergency department management for the TBI patient, as with all traumatic patients. As with all trauma patients, the first priority with TBI are ABCs. It means airway, breathing, or circulation. It's very important to as with all trauma patients, the first priority in patients with TBI is also ABC. It means airway, breathing, and circulation, regardless of severity of patients' injuries. In patients with severe traumatic brain injuries, a systolic blood pressure less than 9 mm hydrogen and the pressure of oxygen less than 60 mm the pressure of oxygen less than 60 mm hydrogen is predict in patients with severe traumatic brain injuries, a systolic blood pressure of less than 9 mm hydrogen and the pressure of oxygen less than 60 mm hydrogen is a predict of poor outcome. So it's better to maintain systolic blood pressure more than 90 mm hydrogen and for the pressure of oxygen it's better more than 60 mm hydrogen. Then rapid medical history is then we should know the medical history, which is summarized as ample. It means we should know the allergies, medication, and past then we should know the medical history, which is summarized in ample, which means allergies, medication, past medical history, last meal, and events. During the process of cardiopulmonary stability, the doctors should conduct a rapid general examination for these patients. One must check for the head, thoracic. We must check for the head, neck, thoracic, abdominal, pelvic, and spine injuries, and injuries involving extremities. Then a rapid and directed neurological examination is performed. The neurological evaluation of a patient with traumatic coma includes, at a minimum, an assessment according to the GCS and the evaluation of the pupil. The GCS is a time-honored, simple, reproducible method of neurological assessment. The GCS consists of 3 components: intensity of stimulus required to eye-opening, motor response, and verbal response. For the eye-opening, spontaneous, the score is 4, to call is 3, to pain is 2, and none is 1. For the motor response, a base command is 6, localized pain is 5, normal flexing is 4, and abnormal flexion is 3, extension is 2, while for no response is 1. For verbal response, oriented is 5, confused conversation is 4, and inappropriate words is 3. Incomprehensible sound is 2, no response is 1. And the best best possible score is 15 and the worst possible score is 3. The GCS score has the standard for objectively the GCS score has become the standard for objectively measuring the severity of TBI. It's also used to grade traumatic brain trauma. The GCS has become the standard for objectively measuring the severity of TBI. It's also used to grade TBI as mild 13 to 15, moderate 9 to 12, and severe 3 to 8. This three-level compartmentalization is quite helpful